Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Dirk Glees and I'm the Director of Sustainable Tourism Development here at UNWTO. I welcome you to the afternoon session of this first technical meeting on the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action in Tourism. As we saw already very lively this morning in our morning session, collaboration is at the heart of the Glasgow Declaration. That's why we wanted, as early as possible, to provide this opportunity to engage and learn more about how far we got, focusing today especially on climate action plans and measurement. I thank you all, the signatories of the Glasgow Declaration, for being with us here today and leading the tourism sector's commitment. And I now pass you on into the very good hands of my colleague, Virginia Fernandez-Trapa. Virginia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dirk, and hello everyone. Welcome to this technical session. I'm Virginia Fernandez-Trapa, Program Officer at the Sustainable Development of Tourism Department at UNWTO. We're all very excited in the team to be delivering this first technical session, well, the afternoon session of the first session, together with the other team members. So Jeremy is connected, Roxana is connected, Ben is connected, Svetlana as well. So thank you so much for connecting once again, for your commitment and for your interest in accelerating climate action in tourism. Before we start with the agenda, I'd like to recall some housekeeping rules for all of us to have a smooth and fruitful session. So please remain muted when you're not invited to speak. And if possible, adjust your name in Zoom using the right click on top of your name to show the name of your organization followed by your name, like you can see on my screen. This allows the rest of participants to see who's there, and it starts, let's say, creating motivation for networking. There will be a Q&A session at the end where you will be invited to post questions on the chat, and please be aware that the session is being recorded. Let's move on to the agenda for the session. First of all, I'd like to highlight the objective of today's meeting, which basically in one sentence is to kickstart the implementation of the Glasgow Declaration. And as an agenda, we have the welcome remarks that were already delivered by our director, Dirk. We will have a presentation that I will share with Jeremy to introduce the progress achieved so far and our priorities for 2022, as well as implementation plans and collaboration mechanisms that we're building around the initiative to basically guide and accompany stakeholders to deliver their commitments. The meeting will last 1 hour, and as mentioned already, the last part will be allocated for Q&A. To enable you to interact also with the team. As you all know, we launched the Glasgow Declaration at the COP on 4th of November at COP26. In the Blue Zone, it was an event hosted by, organized by UNWTO and hosted by the UNFCCC, UN Agency for Climate Change. It was a successful event, well attended, and it was covered by over 400 news articles and had a combined reach of approximately 560 million. And at the launch, we already counted with 300 signatories, the so-called launch partners. And since then, organizations have continued to join, to sign, and momentum continues to build. To put everyone into context, I'll briefly like to share with you an overview of the progress. So when we started the work, the drafting of the declaration was initiated back in March. We formed a drafting committee together with the colleagues in UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, Visit Scotland, the Travel Foundation, Tourism Declares, and colleagues from the One Planet Sustainable Tourism Programme. We followed a participatory approach, so consultations took place with stakeholders. And after the launch, we formalized an alliance with the Travel Foundation and Tourism Declares to ensure the implementation of the Glasgow Declaration within the framework of the One Planet network. As of today, well, I mean, as of 17th of January, so a week ago, the Glasgow Declaration counts 482 signatories, which are split in 3 types. We have business signatories, we have destination signatories, and supporting organization signatories, with businesses so far being the most numerous. On the bar chart on the right side of the slide, you can visualize the subtypes of stakeholders for each of the groups. It is interesting to point out the large number of tour operators that have committed. It is 122 tour operators, which represent 25% of the whole of signatories. We also have accommodation providers that represent 9% of the total signatories. NGOs are quite numerous as well, 14% of the total signatories, and some DMOs and DMCs representing 5% and 6% of the overall signatories. On this slide, we have a few logos from signatories to give you an idea of some of the organizations we have on board. Of course, it's difficult to fit 482 logos on one slide, so this is just a small sample. We have a website where all signatories are listed so far as a list, but the website is being upgraded. It will soon be featuring all of your logos and also the commitment pitch that you were submitting together with your commitments. It will also include search filters to make it easy to check who's part of the initiative. I know that some of you here connected today are not yet signatories. So I would also like to briefly recap the commitments that signatories make when joining Glasgow Declaration. The first one is that they commit to support the global commitment to halve emissions by 2030 and reach net zero. They also commit to deliver climate action plans within 12 months from becoming a signatory, or if they already have a plan, updating the plan as necessary and obviously implementing the plan. That they would align with 5 pathways: measure, decarbonize, regenerate, collaborate, and finance, and that they would report on an annual basis on progress and work on a collaborative spirit. There are now, on the slide deck, there are 3 slides which we'll go through briefly. They basically show the results of a research that we conducted also in parallel while the destination was being formulated. It was a global climate action survey. And basically through the results of the survey, we were able to confirm our pre-existing assumptions, assumptions that led to the inclusion of the elements that you saw in the commitments. So, for example, we had the assumption that action planning was under-addressed, and through the survey we confirmed it. We also confirmed that it is a minority of organizations in our sector, at least from the respondents who are measuring, and that out of those that are measuring, even fewer are disclosing their progress. The research is not only connected with the commitments, but also with the priorities that we have identified for 2022. So as priorities for this year, we have planning and measuring. We want to develop the necessary guidance. We have reporting. We will enable a reporting mechanism through the One Planet network platform that will allow us to showcase and monitor progress, and advocacy, so that we continue building a movement to accelerate climate action in tourism. My colleague Jeremy will be providing more details about the different priorities in a few minutes, but before I close my part of the presentation, basically I wanted to outline what is the value proposition, our value proposition for stakeholders. So for you, we're committed to promote knowledge sharing and capacity building, so to accelerate the replication and scaling up of successful actions across stakeholders. We want to promote destination and value chain level cooperation, so fostering and supporting the work at destination level to develop plans that are connecting all the stakeholders in the destination. We'd like to promote tracking and disclosing of progress, as I said, through the reporting mechanism, and also visibility and international recognition through highlighting organizations that are involved in successful actions via case studies, other communication products, and also participation in international fora. So we look forward to working closely with all signatories on delivering the above, and hope that those of you who are still considering to become signatories will soon be joining us. And now over to you, Jeremy, for the next part of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Thank you, Dirk, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you and to start to see this initiative come to life. You know, we've been working on this for almost a year now, and to see all of you here engaged and taking action is exactly what we envisaged when we started this cooperation, and really hope that we can build a sense of shared ownership over the Glasgow Declaration initiative as we go forward. So my name is Jeremy Sampson. I'm the CEO of the Travel Foundation and a member of the coordination team for the Glasgow Declaration initiative. My part of the presentation is really to give you a bit more detail about what we're planning. Virginia laid out for you the priorities for this year, the sort of priority areas, and I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about what it is that we're planning to do and to share with all of you as we go forward in 2022. So as Virginia said, our first priority for this year is to support initial action planning efforts of signatories. You know, we recognize that we've got a diverse group of stakeholders here that are at different points of the journey when it comes to climate action planning. We also recognize that not all of you are just getting started. Your efforts may be already moving towards implementation or an acceleration of your efforts, and of course reporting on progress, which we really value and we'll come back to in a few moments. But many of you, and you could see from the survey results, and this is true across our sector, many organizations are just starting out with their climate action planning journey. So many that are still not involved in this initiative. And one of the main things that we want to accomplish at this stage is to demystify climate action planning, so that more and more organizations can see what it means to take effective action and can overcome some of those, I think, barriers to entry that we understand are around just, you know, whether it's not understanding the role of an organization in influencing or delivering on climate action, maybe not understanding the basics, maybe not just understanding what a good plan looks like. And so we really want to go through that process of you know, making this easy and creating more and more of a platform for people to engage with our initiative. To start with, as much as possible, we want to ensure that climate action plans are aligned with the 5 pathways of the Glasgow Declaration. We did that very intentionally. As we wrote the declaration, we imagined plans following a very similar structure, and we think it provides a helpful framework. With the top 3 areas, probably the most critical for most of you, you know, so measurement, making sure that we are, of course, measuring impacts and able to measure progress towards the goals and ambitions of the declaration, making significant efforts towards decarbonization, understanding what are those levers that each of you can pull to decarbonize activities, and identifying opportunities for adaptation and regeneration, so that our sector ultimately contributes positively towards the health of ecosystems and communities, which I know all of us care about tremendously. You know, the other 2 areas, which are collaborate and finance, are really enablers to make those above 3 come to life. Although, in fact, for many of you, especially those of you who are supporting organizations or maybe even some DMOs, those 2 pathways around collaborate and finance are, because of the role that you play as multipliers and as influencers, are perhaps the most important pathways to consider. And of course, you know, one of the key tenets of our initiative in general is to work together in a collaborative spirit. Our expectations for the first year are that many of you will effectively need what we might like to think of as a plan for a plan. So setting the enabling environment within your organization, building the foundation for long-term success, ensuring that the right resources, whether they're human or financial, are allocated towards scaling up effective climate action across your organization. Engaging stakeholders, whether they be internal or external, in this process. Identifying those low-hanging fruit opportunity to really start to tackle right away, and putting in place the resources and the structure for effective measurement in particular over time, knowing that this is something that will take an ongoing effort as we go forward. One of the things we are doing this year is developing guidance for signatories on how to develop their climate action plans in the form of quick guides, which we hope to serve as templates for you to be able to start this work, particularly for those of you who are sort of early on in your journey, back to that point of demystifying. We also know that this is not a one-size-fits-all process. It is, of course, essential that you take these materials and are able to contextualize them within your environment, that you lead participatory processes within your own stakeholder groups, within your own organizations or destinations, to transform these guides and templates into a tailored approach that can work for you and your team. As the years proceed and we scale up our actions collectively, we can assume that these action plans will progress, both in terms of sort of technical capacity and ambition. We know that we need to do that if we're going to hit our 2030 targets, to have, to cut global emissions in half. So we expect that these plans will evolve and perhaps get more complex and scale up in terms of the resources and capacity needed to deliver on that ambition. We also want to say that, we recognize the value of everyone here. And again, we know that everyone is at different points of their journey, and we think that everyone has something to offer. So your perspective and insights are important, whether you've not yet started on this journey or whether you're, really far down the path. Our intention is to build a bit on what Tourism Declares has done over the last couple of years, which is providing opportunities for people to come together, to learn from one another, to be inspired by one another, to educate, to share practices, to share good examples, and to share resources. After all, this is going to be best achieved if we're working in that collaborative spirit. And those who are further ahead, are often keen to share their lessons learned. We're going to hear from a few of them here today. And the development of guidance will be supported by working groups, and we'll get to that structure in just a moment. But our goal is for you all to be able to engage in this process, contribute to the extent that you're capable, so that what we're developing is really a collaborative resource. And what we're going to do is highlight as much as we can what leading organizations are doing as a way to showcase efforts and provide a bit of a lighthouse for our sector. To that point, we're actually currently working at the Travel Foundation with Visit Scotland on a number of projects supporting DMOs there to start to scale up their climate action, to work on their very first climate action plans. We're doing some public-private collaboration alongside our friends at the Travel Corporation, and we're looking at national strategies as well. Our goal is to share all of these results and produce resultant guidance out of that. I know Visit Scotland is also quite keen to contribute to this initiative in that way. And the more examples there are that we can bring to the table, the better this guidance will be, and the more examples you all will have for your own inspiration to take forward. We do intend through this process to have a specific focus on two stakeholder groups. One of those are our small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, which make up 90% of our sector. Given this is where collaboration for all of us really comes into play, supply chains and communities are everyone's business, and we know that that particular group is in need of help in thinking about and assistance in thinking about what is the role that they can play, and how do we support our sector to accelerate climate action across all levels of our industry. It's also the case, and the second stakeholder group that we feel needs probably the most support is our destinations and DMOs. Destination approaches to climate action planning are perhaps the least developed, and there's a need to create best practices and approaches where no clear path yet exists. So there will be work happening on this specifically. And again, we think whatever your role is in this industry, destinations are also everyone's business, and that collaborative effort that we can bring to the table to scale up action at the destination level is going to benefit us all in trying to achieve global targets. That doesn't mean this initiative isn't for everyone. Again, we want to reflect and represent who all is at the table, but those are two areas where we, in our analysis, felt needed the most support from this initiative as we start to tackle our priorities in the next months. I should mention that the guidance on planning will be connected to the reporting mechanism that Virginia alluded to earlier, and that, like everything else, this reporting mechanism will be developed in a participatory way, so that everything that we do is feeding into reporting at the initiative level, and will be easy enough for you as signatories to be able to feed into, so that we can collate good information across our organizations and create clear and specific expectations for what you need to do on an annual basis. I want to talk a little bit about the repository of resources that we've also alluded to. I think hopefully everyone is going to get to know this repository really well as it becomes more robust. Right now, we've started to curate a few resources there. The main one is the recommended actions report, which hopefully many of you have seen. If you haven't, I encourage you to go take a look as soon as possible. This recommended actions report is intended to provide a starting point for signatories. There are actions categorized according to the 5 pathways of the Glasgow Declaration, and also are grouped, targeted according to the type of signatory that you are. This report was developed last year by our friends at the UN Environment Program with support from the rest of the Glasgow Declaration drafting committee. And as I said, it's available in that repository, and you can go have a look right away. And as I said, this repository of resources we expect in the coming months to become more robust as we curate resources and helpful guidance and tools that we want to share with each of you as our signatory community. So measurement is a key element of climate action planning, of course. And so this is being addressed, as Virginia mentioned, as one of our main priorities. We know and understand how important this is to everyone, and in many cases, how confusing it remains to many of you. There are resources out there, and we've collected more through the global survey on climate action that Virginia mentioned earlier. We're going to be conducting additional research in the coming months, trying to understand the range of resources and tools that exist, and to assess on your behalf which are the most useful. And all of this will be collated into a briefing paper that we'll be able to share with you in the next few months, probably by mid-year, which we hope will be a useful step forward for us in helping work with this community to understand which are the most effective tools and approaches to move forward with measurement, and how do we sort of take those measurement methodologies and bring them to scale across our sector. We also are going to host some online trainings later this year on selected tools, so that you all can tap into those trainings and understand which ones may be most effective for you in your own, in your own context. Our goal is to help you measure and benchmark in as coordinated a fashion as is possible. Recognizing again that there are different approaches, and again, probably no one size fits all. So it's a bit of a process to understand, how do we identify the tools that are going to be most effective across the across organizations, and give you what you need to adapt those within your own context. And finally, the other priority is around advocacy. We recognize that it's really important to grow the signatory group. It's great that we have 500 or so, already involved, but considering the breadth and scope of our sector, it's really a drop in the bucket. So our goal is to communicate, and together with you all, communicate to those outside, the importance of accelerating climate action across our sector, and demonstrate the benefits of belonging to this initiative, that value proposition that we shared earlier. We also see the Glasgow Declaration initiative as a unique opportunity to advocate for change. So we want to work with you to identify the priority areas to champion and think together how it is that we can effectively scale and accelerate the change that we know needs to occur across travel and tourism. So we want to explore together what messaging and what tactics may be needed for the sector to gain position as climate action leaders, and gain support thanks to the efforts that you're putting in as front runners. And we also want to support, we have our third signatory typology: destinations, businesses, and supporter organizations. Supporter organizations as key multipliers are I think, really important for this initiative. And we want to think together, how do we help you spread the word and advocate for the implementation of this declaration and deliver on your potential to reach members and deliver on that multiplier effect that we know is possible. And when possible, we want to be together in person and take advantage of opportunities to do so and build community in this way. I know many of us were disappointed that ITB was indeed canceled again this year. We had some original thoughts about trying to have a first gathering there in Berlin, which unfortunately were not able to happen because of the virtual nature. But we are already starting to plan for COP27, which will be in Egypt in November, and hopefully there will be more opportunities that emerge as we go forward. So those are the priority areas. Hopefully I've given you a little bit of detail and understanding about what it is we're focusing on and why. In terms of how this is all going to come together, so we are in the process of developing terms of reference for an advisory committee. This advisory committee will be an advisory committee at the initiative level. It will include representatives from all signatory types, and the goal is to bring in high-level representatives from government and from business, from the corporate setting, who are committed to helping us drive the initiative and position the initiative globally. We are also looking at developing now terms of reference for 3 working groups. These may evolve, they may grow. We're sort of open and flexible to how this changes, but this is we think a really good starting point in order to deliver on the priority areas that we've identified. So working group number 1 will be focused on destinations specifically. There we would like to bring together front-running destinations who are already up and running with climate action planning, to discuss how we move forward with destination-specific topics, advance on destination climate action planning, look at the measurement piece really closely, and figure out how we advance on this area, which as I said earlier, we think needs some love and attention. There will be a working group on capacity building. So we want to work together again with you all as these guidance tools and resources are curated and produced. We want to make sure that they're reflective of the needs of the signatories to this initiative, that we're thinking about, again, those who have not yet joined, so that we can demystify, and we're going to need your engagement and feedback to make sure that those tools and resources are produced effectively. And finally, there will be a third working group on outreach and communications, and this will support the advocacy pillar that I alluded to earlier, as well as helping supporting organizations think about what their climate action plans should look like, focusing on those 2 final pathways of collaboration and finance. Each working group will also feed into the collective development of this reporting framework that we've talked about. And really, this is all interconnected. We don't see it as siloed. We want everything, we want all of this work to feed into a common framework that we can all be excited about. And just to say that terms of reference are currently in development for these working groups and the advisory committee. We will send them out as soon as they're ready and give you an opportunity to engage. If you already have a sense of the kind of group that you might be interested or willing to participate in, let us know where you want to engage, and we'll be really excited to start to formalize that involvement. So before I close, I just want to summarize next steps. In the next short-term period, next few weeks to couple of months, our goal is to get out these invitations to join working groups and hold the first meetings, so that we can start that in-depth engagement. The repository, which we've mentioned, it's already operational. There, as you said, a few resources, but we expect that to become more robust over time, and for you all to have more excuse to visit that particular location, because it'll become such a valuable resource for you going forward. And we will produce the initial guidance on climate action planning, which we expect to continue to evolve, but we know we'd like to get at least a first version out there for those of you who are taking action in 2022. Later this year, we'll add additional resources for action planning, so that initial guide we expect to evolve. The briefing paper on measurement will be produced and shared with all of you, and the first training materials to come out of that assessment will start to become available. And by the end of this year, we will have COP27 in Egypt, which we've mentioned, and hopefully another big moment for our initiative to celebrate its first year of being alive. And those of you who signed on last year around the time of Glasgow will be, of course, submitting your very first action plans by November, giving us that first year of reporting, which we're really looking forward to. And before I close, I just want to give a final call to action to make sure that you're signed up to receive updates via our newsletter. This is available to signatories, or as well as those who are interested in following along with this initiative. And please, give us your feedback on our plans. These are plans that we expect to continue to evolve and improve with your feedback and input. You'll have a chance as well during the Q&A in a few minutes to make that contribution. But if you do have feedback for the organizing committee, please reach out at any time and share your thoughts so that we can take them into consideration. And I will close now and hand it back to you, Virginia.
Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing the details of our priorities and implementation plan. We're now moving into the third item of the agenda, which are the insights from signatories. We have invited 3 colleagues representing the 3 types of signatories that we have in the destination. Can I get the next slide, please? So basically, before I introduce them, I'd like to thank you all for the insights that you provided when we circulated the survey. We're really thankful. We had 81 responses to the survey, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the 3 main areas that were coming up in your questions were planning, reporting, and measurement. Some of these questions we will be answering in the course of our discussion with the invited colleagues, and some of those we expect to discuss during the Q&A. Please don't hesitate to already start typing your questions in the Q&A. We won't be able to open the mics as we are numerous, but with help from colleagues, we will be reading the questions from the Q&A. So don't hesitate to already start posting there your questions. Then let's introduce the colleagues that we have invited to share. We have Arika Sir. She's Deputy Director of the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. Nadine Pinto, Global Sustainability Manager at the Travel Corporation. And Polly Lomas, Senior Program Manager, Strategic Initiatives at Travelist. Thank you all so much for accepting our invitation to share a few insights today. I'll start with a question for Arika. Arika, you, as a DMO that has initiated the development of a climate action plan, could you share with us some of the lessons learned while taking those initial steps and some recommendations with the group, as we also have other destinations connected.
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everybody from Oregon. It's a beautiful winter day here. My name is Erica Sears, like she mentioned, and I'm the Deputy Director of a nonprofit destination management organization here on the Oregon coast. And we have been working on our climate action planning for not even a year yet, but it feels like we've been doing this for a very long time, just because we have learned so much. And when I reflect back to when we were just thinking about getting started on this, starting to get excited, we were thinking like, what does climate action actually look like for a destination? Are we going to install solar panels on businesses? Like, we just had no idea. And a lot of the conversation was really, what does this look like? What does this look like? What does this look like? And so I'm so glad that Jeremy shared some examples that you can now look at to see what do these actual actions look like for a destination to use as concrete examples. Fast forward to now, and there are so many different actions a destination can take that it can actually be overwhelming. There are so many solutions and avenues and paths that you can take in working in this plan, that one of my recommendations for getting started here is really identifying what your role as a destination management organization is in your destination. Every destination management organization or marketing organization looks a little bit different. The size of your region is different. I'm joined here also by Patty Martin, our climate scientist. And we got started with our plan and we developed this very cool plan. And then we looked at it and we're like, wow, that's a great plan, but not for our organization. We would never be able to implement that. We do not work directly with thousands of businesses back and forth. So we had to reassess and say, but what we do is provide tools and templates for our other DMOs, chambers, and businesses. So one of our key takeaways, I would say, is just identifying who do you work with and what's the way that you work within your destination. We've already reorganized our plan to use the 5 pathways, and then additionally have 3 levels. We have our internal operations, timing, strategies, and staff. We have our partners like smaller DMOs and chambers within our region. And we also have our visitors that we want to provide tools and marketing and inspiration to. So that's how we're starting to reorganize our plan. And I would recommend just identifying how your destination marketing or management organization works. The second kind of lesson that we learned in those key initial steps is the communications and outreach that you do when you start working on this. Our board and our staff, we talked about it, we were so excited, and we just sort of released it out in the world. Like, we declare a climate emergency and we're going to work on this. And there was a little bit of confusion. People were like, wait, what? Does tourism work in this space? Have you guys always talked about this? Was this a secret? Like, it was like this very kind of different, confusing feedback. And so what I would recommend is having some one-on-one conversations within your region with key stakeholders, really those partners that are already doing this work, and have them be your local champions. Have them be quoted in your press release. Have them also on your panels talking about why they're excited that you as a destination are working on this. And then again, I would go back to concrete examples when you're doing these communications, when you're getting your local policymakers and partners excited, using those concrete examples of this is what it could look like. This is what Scotland is doing. This is what Palau is doing. And this is how we think it could work in our destination. We are all storytellers. It's what our industry is so good at. And so being able to tell those stories can be really helpful and motivating and inspiring your stakeholders and your partners to be in this journey with you. So I think those are my 2 lessons learned. If I could get in a time machine and go back 8 months, I would maybe do those things a little bit differently. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Arika. Amazing insights, I would say, very, very practical. The truth is that each destination will have to follow their own process, right? It will have to develop, as Jeremy said, their own participatory approach. No matter how many templates we develop, at the end of the day, you have to define what works for you. But I find your recommendations extremely useful. I hope that the other destinations connected with us today feel a bit more reassured that it is possible to take meaningful action. And of course, we look forward to continuing collaboration. So thanks a lot. I have next question for Polly from Travelist. So Polly, you have signed the Glasgow Declaration as a supporting organization. And you are also working on creating an industry-aligned framework that will integrate climate and will integrate sustainability. So I guess a big part of your climate action plan will be focused on collaboration. What are the learnings, and how do you think this will contribute to the implementation of the Glasgow Declaration and have multiplier effects?
Cool. Thank you, Virginia. Yeah, and hi, great to be part of the discussion. I'm Polly, and yeah, worked on developing Travelist Climate Action Plan. Just for a little bit of background for those who don't know, Travelist is a non-profit focused on scaling sustainable travel choices for mainstream consumers. We were founded at the end of 2019 by the Duke of Sussex in partnership with 5 leading travel companies: Booking.com, Skyscanner, Trip.com Group, TripAdvisor, and Visa. We recently had Google join late last year as well. And so the core mission of Travelist is to make it easier for travelers and travel providers to make sustainable choices. And the first step that we're taking to achieve this is to create, as Virginia mentioned, industry-aligned sustainability indicators that are consistent, credible, and easy to understand for both consumers and the industry. But as part of our work to accelerate sustainable tourism, we also recognize the role that we must play in tackling the climate crisis as an organization and entity itself. So in November 2021, we committed to reduce our carbon footprint each year to achieve net zero by 2030. And also, I guess, in Travelist's core spirit of industry alignment and collaboration, we felt it was vital that we sign up to the Glasgow Declaration as well as a supporting organization. For us, this was because we not only recognize the benefit that committing to an industry-wide initiative brings in terms of learning from others, exactly as Jeremy had mentioned earlier, sharing knowledge and capacity building, but also the power of us all working together as an industry to drive greater awareness and action to tackle the climate emergency. So in terms of learnings that we've taken from developing our climate action plan, we definitely echo what Jeremy and the others have said today. Firstly, collaboration is key. We understood that we weren't experts on this topic at all, and so we began by speaking to those in our network who were. We enlisted help from a sustainability consultancy, eCollective, who helped us to develop an ambitious and yet achievable climate action plan. And we also stress tested this plan with trusted folks to ensure it was robust. By speaking to people who had done the work before, or looking at guidelines and best practice on how to develop a climate action plan, such as Tourism Declares, we were able to kick off this work quickly and felt confident about the direction we were taking. I'd say another learning which follows on from the first is to break the problem down into sizable chunks. We started by measuring our footprint, then breaking it down into the areas that had the greatest carbon footprint, such as business travel or our office. Following this, we then set targets and plans to reduce our footprint in each of these areas with a focus on the most impactful areas. This made the task at hand feel a lot more manageable. I think sometimes you get given, let's develop a climate action plan, and that's kind of overwhelming in itself. So breaking it down to those sort of smaller chunks made it a lot easier and manageable, and allowed us to kind of achieve success in a lot of a quicker pace than we anticipated. And finally, I'd say you need someone within the organization who is actually going to drive the work forward. It's vital to have support and buy-in from across your organization for this work. But I would say there also needs to be that individual who is accountable and will actually implement the work, whether that's collecting the data, getting buy-in or resources from senior leadership to achieve those targets and implement things, or even communicating the plan publicly. Yeah, so I guess that's a quick whistle-stop tour of some of our learnings from developing our climate action plan. And yeah, I'll pass back over to you, Virginia.
Thank you so much, Polly, for sharing so openly so many insights. I like it very much that you all reiterate the aspect of collaboration. Actually, it's also the essence of these technical sessions that we all have the chance to exchange. And yeah, basically what we wanted to give you with this mini panel, if you allow me to call it like this, is a taste of the type of discussions that we would really look forward to having within the working groups, for example, where we pick a topic and we really discuss it openly and that way we advance jointly, because climate action is everyone's business. So thanks a lot. And now the third question I'd like to ask to Nadine. Nadine from the Travel Corporation. So as a tour operator that is well advanced in the journey of measurement, Nadine, could you share some insights with the group on the complexities of measuring scope 3, and like a few tips for those that are at the beginning of the journey of measurement, which can be very daunting, to be able to start approaching it with confidence?
Sure. Well, good morning, good afternoon from a very cold Toronto. My name is Nadine, and I'm the Global Sustainability Manager at the Travel Corporation. TTC owns 40 travel brands, and we operate in over 70 countries. So we're not a typical tour operator, made evident by trying to measure our Scope 3 emissions. There are a few off-the-shelf trip carbon calculators available. However, they didn't quite work for our business, and I'll get into a bit of why. But we did have to create a bespoke carbon calculator to measure the emissions of our trips. And that, again, is our Scope 3 emissions. The first complexity that we encountered was really to understand, where do you draw your boundaries around Scope 3? And at times it can feel overwhelming. So what exactly is being taken into account into your trip carbon footprint? For example, do we limit it at the electricity or the energy use of an accommodation? Or do we go a step beyond that and take a look at, well, what are all the plastics and the embodied carbon in those plastics? Is that also part of the trip footprint? So we decided to limit this to the emissions from the energy use of accommodations, the fuel use from transportation, as well as all included meals. And so my tip here is that more and more companies are publishing their methodologies. Typically, a trip footprint will include transport, accommodation, experiences, and meals at minimum. But I do invite all tour operators to seek out these methodologies that companies are self-publishing, and really try to understand, what's the best practice. I'm sure the repository of tools and resources that Jeremy shared earlier will include several of these methodologies, so be sure to check that out. The other complexity that was unique to TTC at the time was we are a very asset-heavy business. That means that we own accommodations, we own ships, we own vehicles that we also use for part of our trips. So as you know, when you own something, that's part of your direct emissions, which is our Scope 1 emissions. But then we were also using it for our trips. So it also sort of fell into our Scope 3 trip emissions. It was really important for us to make sure we're not double counting those emissions between Scope 1 and Scope 3. And for that reason, we had to build our own calculator that would kind of subtract those emissions from our Scope 3 emissions and make sure that they were accounted for in Scope 1. At the end of the day, we do want to ensure we're not double counting. So this was an important consideration that, as an asset-heavy tour operator, I recommend that everyone takes into consideration. You can do that by just mapping out your inventory, making sure you're really clear on what are your direct emissions and what are your indirect emissions, and making sure there's no double counting in there. And then the last tip I would like to offer is really don't be afraid to ask questions from tour operators that have similar style of businesses as to your own. We really are kind of pioneering this field of measuring trip emissions, and we're all sort of experiencing the same challenges, whether you're an asset-heavy business or whether you're just offering trips. I think we're all kind of running into problems as we go. So really just reach out with questions and build that community, as Jeremy and others on the panel have suggested. And we're all in it together.
Thank you so much, Nadine. Completely agree. I mean, for something so complicated than like Scope 3, we have no other option than come together. Also, as I mean, in some aspects, like office missions might be quite straightforward, but with Scope 3, when you're a tour operator, you're a hotelier, or all the kinds of stakeholders we have in our sector, coming together is fundamental, because like one Scope 3 would overlap with another. So where and how do we agree on the ways of measuring Scope 3? Definitely to be addressed among our priorities. So thanks for your insights. Very, very useful. And now we're moving into the Q&A. We are lucky to count on the support of our colleagues, Ben Lynham, Head of Communications from the Travel Foundation, and Roxana Ashtari, Project Specialist at UNWTO, they will help us with the questions in the chat. So let's get started. Ben and Roxana, do we already have interesting questions, please?
Yes. Yeah. You want to go first, Ben?
We can do. We'll try and take it in turns. I'm going to go with the second question first because it's such a big one. Faisal Al-Fadl from SGBF, his big question is, what is the ideal outcome from this outstanding initiative? So really thinking outside the box, what is the big success endpoint?
I can start if you want, Virginia, and maybe we will both have some vision on this. So hopefully they're aligned. You know, the easy answer is that we achieved the ambitions set out in the declaration. I mean, this is this would be I mean, it's an important achievement and a critical one, and I think delivering on such a collaboration to achieve the ambitions of the Glasgow Declaration, which ultimately the goal is to align our sector with international agreements and with what science is telling us that needs to happen. So, I mean, as a starting point, we should be thinking about, that we actually achieve those goals. I think more broadly for me, I have seen this particular topic as a catalyst for us to transform the sector into something that we can be even more proud of. We all like to just talk about the idea that travel and tourism is a force for good. I'm sure that all of us here believe that in our hearts. And if we can use this and we think about the framework of the declaration, there's so much opportunity for travel and tourism to be a leader in this area and to use the change that needs to occur, whether it's responding to the need to decarbonize, whether it's the adaptation piece, and to think about how we contribute to a regenerative philosophy, supporting healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. If we can use this opportunity to really transform tourism into something that can indeed be that catalyst, then I think there's huge potential for the outcomes that we can achieve collectively.
Thanks, Jeremy. I completely agree. So no worries there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, basically in one sentence, we really want to deliver what we have committed to, and that those are the commitments of the declaration, and to enable the signatories to deliver their commitments. I mean, there's a lot that tourism can do in terms of climate action. There's a lot which is already being done, actually, that is not taken into account as climate action, that it should. So basically creating a movement for our sector to be recognized as a relevant sector capable of bringing change and addressing climate action. Thank you. I'm sure we have more questions, right, colleagues?
Yes, we have a very famous question as usual, scope 3.
Scope 3.
Yes, here it is. So Neil Brekenhoff, it's saying that they are a tour operator with with a lot of experience in more than 20 countries. You are still struggling with ways to implement carbon management for the scope 3 emissions for our itineraries, especially for accommodation providers. And they are asking, so is something that I would like to hear how this platform or other involved can help with going forward. And earlier he had mentioned that the aggregated HCMI data for a variety of countries does not give much insight into accommodation types beyond hotels. So if we have some suggestions for him and if we have planned for future, would be very helpful.
I mean, I'll give the floor to Nadine also in a minute, because I'm sure she's bearing way more knowledge than myself. But just to reassure you, of course, scope 3 is something that we're going to be addressing. As Jeremy outlined, measurement is one of the priorities. There will be a working group. There will be tools that are going to be checked, tested, and reviewed with all of you. So I don't have the tool in mind as we speak, but I'm sure that together we can find it. So please do not hesitate to join us in that discussion. Nadine, do you want to add?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And we also use the HCMI. We recognize, it doesn't necessarily have updated information or as you've noted what the gaps are there. I think, policy and guidance is going to get us so far, but then we also need to take it one step further from a tour operator perspective. What is our responsibility as a tour operator? This guidance might not necessarily sit outside of what we're responsible for. So for example, could we create our own questionnaires that are asking accommodation providers, what are you doing on climate action? What are your sources of renewable energy? Do you have plans to put in renewable energy? And by doing those sorts of things, you kind of showcase to your accommodations that these are the things that you're looking for in partners where you want to take tours. And this is something that's important to you and your company. And then it'll follow in line, over the next few years. Maybe you only have 20% of your accommodations right now using renewable energy, but then 2 or 3, 4 years down the line, you have that grow to 50%. So I think the guidance is going to take a while to catch up, and it's always going to be a bit out of date because that's just the way that measurement works. But really, what are some proactive steps that you can take to encourage your suppliers to then take up low carbon alternatives would be my suggestion.
Okay, next question, shall I?
Sorry, Ben, I see that Arika's raising the hand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I guess.
Just briefly, I wanted to mention as you're developing your plans to keep in mind, especially if we're developing 10-year plans, that we're going to run into a few situations where the technology doesn't exist yet or it's not affordable yet for our partners to use or for us to use. But that is developing rapidly. Like every day there's new technology coming out. It's becoming more affordable, easier to use for small businesses. So it's also important in our plans to have this yearly or every 2 years. You're allowed to change your plan. You're allowed to update your plan, modify your plan too. And I think there is some relief in that. So if the technology doesn't exist or we don't have that solution right now to scope 3, like Nadine said, do what you can. What can you do right now? Is that advocating for airlines to start working on this? Is it advocating for policymakers to help fund it? Whatever it is. But we do find a little bit of relief in the fact that your plan is not set in stone. You're allowed to update it as things become more affordable and accessible to our partners.
A bit about advocacy and influence. I just want to say it's critical for everyone here because, and this is one of the first questions everyone asks when they're starting out. It's like, what is my role? What can I actually do? What is my mandate to change? What can I but I think the spheres of influence are much broader than people realize sometimes. So there's the thinking about it in that sense of like, what can I control tomorrow? But what's my sort of radius of influence? I think is a really interesting way to think about planning.
Okay, next question. I think it's the final one at the moment, and that might be a good thing from a time perspective too. But if you have got more, keep them coming, and we can always come to them afterwards. It's been commented on by a few people. Little Gwendreth Holiday Cottages first pitched this question. They've drafted a climate action plan, and they're kind of thinking, what now? Is there something they can do to kind of peer review it, get some people involved in just some reassurances and improvements? Or should they just go ahead and publish it and see what happens? And maybe, so I just think advice around that. And people were suggesting, is there a way that could be facilitated, I think, through the Glasgow Declaration too?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, as part of the work of the working group. I mean, we know that many of you were, for example, and still are, signatories of Tourism Declares and declared a climate emergency, and that was what triggered the development of your climate plans. I don't know if your particular plan was also emerging from connection with Tourism Declares. We're now working together, so we're trying to find synergies between the plans that exist and the guidance that we will provide. As the colleagues have mentioned, this is a learning process. We are not going to be expecting perfection from day one. We just need to take action from day one, and then we will maybe achieve perfection one day. So hopefully you can join the group and then share a bit more in detail what are the points that you want feedback on. I think that could be useful also for everyone else in the group.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think peer review is a good practice in general, just for your own improvement, but then for also towards what we're trying to accomplish as a global initiative to provide that opportunity for others to learn from you. And we can maybe have a think, because I think it's a great suggestion on whether there's some more formal way of facilitating such a peer review among the signatories. And let's take that on board and consider how we might foster such an environment.
Okay, so we have completed the 1 hour that we had scheduled to be together. So we will close the session for today. Thank you all so much. It's been really enriching and definitely motivating. I'm looking forward to the next session and more exchanges with you within the framework of the Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action in Tourism. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter so that you receive the news, and have a nice day. Thank you all so much. And especially to our invited speakers. Thank you, participants.